Vladimir van Wilgenburg is a journalist who spent 5 months in Syria in 2016, embedded with rebels from the Syrian Democratic Forces. He joins me now via Skype from Sulaymaniyah in Iraq. Thanks very much for speaking to us. So the UN has raised concerns about, well, they've used quite strong language. They're talking about a staggering loss of civilian life in Raqqa. What can you tell us about the intensification of airstrikes in the area?
Well, the SDF has started the operation on the 6th of June, so clearly the number of airstrike has intensified. And actually, also the Russian government has accused the US of the same thing, of civilian casualties. But so far, it's a little bit unlikely that there are so many casualties because the battle has not intensified yet. Because what we have seen in the battle for Mosul, that the number of civilian casualties rose when the battle started to get more inside of the city, and it's still on the outskirts of Raqqa.
So how much worse could it get? Do you think that there might be fewer casualties if the city has been emptied out? You know, tens of thousands of people have been leaving the area, or could we see similarity to the situation in Mosul replicating itself?
Well, the problem is that the civilians, they cannot get out. There are already several thousands of civilians that managed to flee Raqqa, but the civilians that are now in Raqqa, they're basically stuck there, and ISIS wants to use them as human shields. So the problem is the civilians that are in Raqqa, they cannot get out. So either they could get killed by ISIS when they're trying to flee, and also ISIS will try to use them in buildings, what we have also seen in Mosul, where they're putting snipers on a building and put civilians downstairs, and then they get hit by airstrikes. So this is the serious situation now in Raqqa.
Do you anticipate that there will be an escalation of airstrikes as the forces try to enter Raqqa?
Well, the number of airstrikes is already increasing now because the Raqqa operation has just started. And most likely when the fighting gets more difficult, when the real urban fight starts, it's going to get much more difficult for civilians, and civilians will either be casualties of ISIS, or there will be casualties because ISIS is trying to use them as human shields, and then they could be hit in airstrikes.
From your reporting and from what you know and the people that you're in touch with, what do you know in terms of numbers, the numbers of civilians who are trapped inside Raqqa?
Well, the number of civilians that have been displaced until now since November is around 200,000. But it's expected that there's at least more than 100,000 to around 200,000 still inside of Raqqa city.
And is there any effort being... I mean, obviously, when the time comes for the Syrian Democratic Forces to actually go into Raqqa, this is something that will be extremely risky, and it's going to be a very difficult operation to handle, also because of the makeup of those forces. Are any efforts being made to try and guarantee, or at least, ensure the safety of the people who are there before they take that step?
Well, the problem is that ISIS doesn't allow the civilians to leave. In the past, the SDF forces in Manbij, they have to try to make safe corridors so that there are areas for them to flee from. But it's very difficult also because there's a lot of mines and IEDs. So this makes it much more difficult for the civilians to flee. If there was sort of an agreement between ISIS and the SDF, which I seem to be very unlikely, then it would be possible for the civilians to flee safely. But it seems unlikely, and it's most likely it's going to be a tough fight between the SDF and ISIS.
Vladimir van Wilgenburg, thank you.
You're welcome.